Now, former President Donald Trump has been acquitted again, this time for incitement of insurrection following the events of January 6th. But this time, 7 Republican senators broke with their party. That was still 10 votes short of conviction. We want to begin this morning with one of the impeachment managers, Colorado Democratic Congressman Joe Neguse. He's in Washington. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Margaret. Good to be with you.
You closed your argument yesterday by saying extremist groups may be emboldened and the violence on the 6th may just be the beginning. Are you saying Republicans are complicit in that? And if so, how do you work across the aisle with them now?
Well, look, what I was saying, Margaret, is very heartfelt on my behalf and on behalf of all the managers, is a real fear that I think many Americans have after witnessing the terrible violence that happened on January 6th and the insurrection that took place on our nation's capital, that without accountability, that many of these groups could very well become more emboldened and perhaps engage in more violence. I had hoped that more senators would ultimately honor their oath by convicting the president. But make no mistake, I mean, the big difference between this year and the headline that you referenced last year is just how historic this vote was. It was the most bipartisan impeachment vote in the history of our republic. 57 senators, including 7 Republicans that you mentioned, chose country over party, looked at our facts objectively that we presented to them, considered the evidence, and reached the same conclusion we did, which was that the president incited insurrection. And we shouldn't lose sight of that. I want to salute and commend those 7 Republicans, people like Ben Sasse and Mitt Romney, really profile and courage, in my view, in terms of the vote that they took.
Why did you back off the request for witnesses?
That's a fair question. I don't know that I would characterize it that way. Look, I know a lot of folks.
Well, you asked for them. The senators said yes, and then the House managers said they didn't require them. That's backing off.
Sure. Well, no, so here's what I would say. I'm happy to answer the question. So Lead Manager Raskin touched on this yesterday. He proceeded with a request for one witness, not multiple witnesses. The request was for the video testimony and deposition testimony, which is how that's been done in prior impeachments, for example, during the Clinton impeachment in 1999 of Congresswoman Herrera Butler. Given what we had learned about her statements just the night before and the full extent of her remarks, rather the conversation she had with Minority Leader McCarthy, that he had with President Trump. And clearly that conversation went directly to the president's state of mind. And in our view, and in the view of clearly 57 senators, supported our theory of the case. So we proceeded, Lead Manager Raskin rather proceeded with that request. It became very clear to us that President's counsel was willing to stipulate to allow that statement to come into evidence and be considered by the Senate. And that was an important stipulation. Ultimately, Lead Manager Raskin read out that statement both to the United States Senate and to the broad American public. But I'll just also say, Margaret, look, I think it's pretty clear, and Lead Manager Raskin touched on this, whether it was 5 more witnesses or 5,000 witnesses, it is very clear that the senators who voted to acquit on a technicality, which was the jurisdictional argument that we had successfully defended early in the trial and actually had convinced a majority of the Senate, including Republicans, that the Senate did have presidential jurisdiction to move forward, it would not have made a difference to those senators. And you heard that from Mitch McConnell himself, who conceded that the president was morally responsible for provoking the events of January 6th.
Well, there do seem to have been some key items that came up at the last minute or were, frankly, overlooked until the last minute. You mentioned Congresswoman Herrera Butler's comments, but she said she first made those public back in January. I also want to play for you these comments from Republican leader McCarthy that were on CBS coverage during the siege.
I'm giving you the opportunity right now that your precious and beloved United States Capitol and our democracy is witnessing this. Call the spade a spade.
I was very clear with the president when I called him. This has to stop, and he's got to go to the American public and tell them to stop this. This is not who we are. This is not who his supporters are. This is more than politics. This is the foundation of this nation. This is the democracy that we are supposed to be the torch for the rest of the world. This is not the view we should see, and nobody should encourage it, and nobody should be a part of it.
That's the Republican leader saying on live television he personally asked the president multiple times to call off his mob. Why leave key moments like that on the table?
I disagree with the premise of that question, Margaret. That statement that you just mentioned, certainly we're aware of. I think, and again, I defer to Lead Manager Raskin on this evidentiary point, but the full extent of the conversation that Leader McCarthy had with the president is what we and the country learned about